Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome. Welcome to day 2 of the Creative Compass. I am Jessica Abel of Autonomous Creative, and this is the Creative Compass Challenge, where you will learn to put your art and writing and other creative endeavors at the top of your to-do list where it belongs and not down at the bottom where it kind of falls off and doesn't get done. So this is the second of 5 days of very simple, straightforward exercises that can unlock your ability to start finishing your amazing creative work without having to lock down every other thing in your life first, which we talked about yesterday. Not possible. So we're going to just push that aside and say, like, okay, we just need to pay ourselves first with our own time and focus on the things that are really important. So, okay, so today's lesson is all about building a new creative habit. But first, I want to hear about your biggest takeaways from yesterday's lesson. So, Chris posted earlier on saying the surface description of the project isn't enough to pull you through the project. You need to get under it and know why you're doing it. That was the big theme of yesterday's lesson, was this idea of understanding the criteria by which you're deciding and what is actually important to you and using that to filter your decision making. Um, so that was a really great one. Thank you, Chris, for that. And then Tamara says, late stage capitalism sucking you dry was her big takeaway. Yep, it's happening, and we have to do the best we can to, avoid that and not let that happen. Um, Susie's takeaway was do the thing. Yes, you have to do the thing, and that is today's lesson is how do you do that thing? Because it's not all that easy. Just deciding, we all know, just saying like, I'm gonna do the thing. This is the thing I'm doing doesn't necessarily work, right? It doesn't necessarily make that happen. And so there's a lot of other, so the big decision is what thing, right? Which thing, which we talked about last time. Now there's a series of smaller decisions we're gonna make all week that will help you actually implement that into your calendar and make it happen. Okay. So let's see if there's anything else here. Aman says, my takeaway procrastination slash distraction result when you haven't made a decision. Yes, this is a thing that I didn't get early on. I didn't understand why that is. But like whenever I'm kind of in that like anxious dithering state, if I realize I'm doing it in the moment, I can look and say, like, okay, what am I not deciding about? Like, what are the things that are floating around that I'm not making a decision about? And that helps me take a breath and step back and do something with it. Um, Virginia says, my big takeaway is that we don't have time to do all the stuff we want to do. So just choose what feels good now. Yes, exactly. There's at least a big part of that. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Eric says, I think setting the criteria for creative endeavors. Yes. Choosing the criteria yourself and not letting them be chosen for you. Very important. And what Nora's takeaway was to go for small or safe success. In the at the micro level, yes. At the macro level, be as ambitious as you wanna be, but at the micro level, in terms of what are you gonna do now in front of you, yes, keep it small, keep it achievable so that you aren't setting the bar so high that you're gonna, set yourself up for failure. Okay, cool. Alright, let's get into today's content, which is about building creative habits. So now you know where you're going, right? You've made a decision about what is the project you're gonna be working on. And I know it may feel a little, shaky, but maybe writing it down will really help. Um, the key to getting there is habitual action, continuing to make actions all day. It's super ironic because I just had my last class of my undergrads for the semester. I was teaching professional practice this semester. And part of that is project planning and getting projects done. And, so we were doing a project planning exercise today, and I had all of these students, and this is the thing that's gonna come up on day 5, saying stuff like, you know, "Week 2, continue on, drafting character designs," or something like that. And I was like, "Okay, but what does that look like actually? What does it look like in practice? What does continue on look like?" And getting more granular about that and pre-deciding what it is and when you're gonna do it, all those kinds of things is really, really key. So obviously, if you wanna do the thing, you have to do the thing, right? That's like it's required. You have to do the thing. But it's not as simple as just saying, "Hey, this is a priority for me," because we say that all the time anyway. Everybody who is here because they have said creative work is a priority, probably said it for years and years and years, and yet are not getting it done the way they want to get it done. They're not putting the time and focus into it they want to be putting into it. So just saying this is a priority doesn't work, right? What you need now is a series of very specific conscious decisions about when, where, and how you're going to do the work. You're pre-deciding, this idea of pre-deciding, which is just deciding earlier. It's not actually a word. I made it up, but that pre-deciding is really key. So the magic of habits, in the words of one of our Creative Focus alums, is that you get to declare, I am a finisher, right? If you can chip away at things bit by bit by bit, you get to the point where you have actually finished, and it's incredible, right? It feels amazing. This is Maggie Winall, who's one of our great members, and she has finished a lot. She's a Quiltrix, Quiltrix, I think she calls herself, and she has finished a lot of quilts and hadn't been finishing stuff, had all these like 20-year-old partially finished things, and she started chipping away at them and going to co-working and working with people and doing bit by bit, and she's finished a ton of amazing work. So I'm gonna be sharing her story in email soon, so you guys will get to know Maggie a little bit, but that's when I read that, I just was like, "Oh, yes, that feeling, I am a finisher. I am." You don't just do the thing, you are the thing. That is the big transformation of habits. It's a transformation of your identity, of who you are. If you do the thing on a regular basis, you are the person who does the thing. You are that person, and that is the transformation we all want. That's what I want for you, and so let's talk about how to set a habit. So I'm gonna share this little, um, graphic. This is from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, that I find, quite useful. So essentially, on the vertical here, you see that there is a, results, so, like, from low results to high results, getting lots of results, and this is the axis of time. So when you start a habit, you're starting here, you think what's gonna happen is that you're gonna be on this steady, climb towards greater results, but it's gonna be regular and reliable and knowable in some way, where in fact, the way it tends to work is that at first, it seems like nothing's happening, and it's, like, really hard to grind through setting this habit and sticking with it and believing, trusting the system, trusting that you're doing the right thing, and you're getting to here, and you're in this area of the valley of disappointment, he calls it, this gap between what you think should happen and what actually happens. And this line could be an angle, like, up this way, possibly, and this line could still be down here, so you could have a large gap there of the valley of disappointment, and you have to live with it and trust the system, trust you're gonna get there because building that habit and sticking with something regularly is what gets you on this curve upwards of greater and greater results. Once you cross this line, sticking with the habit gets you in a much better place than you think you're gonna be. But for a while, it puts you in a place that's worse than what you think it's gonna be. That's what this is all about. So, first of all, you have to decide what habit you wanna build, and deciding, like, what that looks like is a little bit tricky. You're gonna get a little bit more information about how to do that on day 5 in terms of, like, what is the next step exactly. But for most creative projects, many of the stages of the project are things like I said my student had today, continue on, right? Work on this thing for a period of time that may be a day or a week or a month or a year. Like, work on this draft, work on this outline, work on these sketches, work on whatever it is. And that work on is where you get into trouble, right? Because it's doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end, seems to never have an end. You're in the plateau or you're in the valley of disappointment, right? And that's that kind of vague work on idea is what puts you in a situation where, like we talked about yesterday in day 1, on the one hand, you feel guilty if you're not working, right? If you go to a family gathering or you go out with friends or you do something fun that you really believe in and you wanna do, or even something serious you wanna do, you're thinking to yourself, "I should be in the studio. I should be working on whatever it is," right? But if you're in the studio, you're thinking like, "Oh my god, this never ends. Oh, it never ends, and, like, why can't I go do this thing that I wanna be doing?" And you get into this state, right? So the secret thing that we've, developed at, the Creative Focus Workshop is this idea of a quota task, quota. So, a quota task is a period of time that you put into a project. We're gonna go over this in more detail on day 5, so, I'll explain more then. But the habit that you can create can just be time on blank, right? Time on whatever stage you're on. It doesn't have to be like, any specific outcome of the habit. It's just like the time for the creative project. That's the habit, right? I'm going to work on my creative project wherever I'm at. And that's to what we're going to talk about on day 5, which is this idea of either measurable tasks, like do a thing that you can finish, or quota tasks, time. So we're going to create a space, like a time amount for this thing. Yesterday, one participant was saying, was asking how long should I expect to spend on something? And I asked her, how long do you have? And she said an hour. And I said, an hour is amazing. So if you have an hour, that is the container that you want to create. If you want to devote an hour to this on a daily basis, that's the container you should create. If you don't have an hour, or if an hour feels like, oh my God, I just I can't concentrate that long, half an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, anything counts. Everything counts. Because even if you start a 2-minute habit, once it's solid and you do it every day, you can very much more easily expand that to 10 minutes and then 15 and then 20 and then an hour, then start from scratch. 2 minutes counts. Everything counts. Okay. So number one, you want to pick the habit that you're going to develop. And my recommendation to you is to pick the habit of a container for continuing on with whatever stage you're at with your project, rather than a very specific kind of thing. Although in some cases, you can do something very specific. Maybe you need to practice a particular thing, or you need to do something else, and that's fine too. But so pick a habit, and everybody who's here, I would love to see you post which habit you're planning to build. So if the habit is a time container, then just say how many minutes you're going to try to do. And if it's something specific, then post that. So step 2 is picking the time and the place. And the time and the place are relative. They're relative to something you already do in your life. That's the idea of a habit trigger. So all of us, we're creatures of habit. I read some statistic, probably in Atomic Habits by James Clear, that was like, I don't know, 70% of what we do every day is habitual. Like we do it the same way, the same time, every day. That may be higher or lower for different people, but a lot of what we do is habitual. And some of our habits are very, very fixed. It can be bad if it's a habit that you don't want, but it's also a great tool for building new habits, because your job now is to figure out what habit do you already do every day, or basically every day. What's the pivot point between something you do every day and a period of time when things are different many days? So there's like a sort of pick from your list, like get stuff done part of the day, or like it's different, whatever, it changes day to day. And frequently, I recommend this is at the end of your morning routine. So, morning routine, you get to some point, and then things are different every day, things change. That's the moment to stick in a new habit. And so that's identifying your trigger, which is the thing that comes right before it. So you start to associate this thing you do every day with this new thing you want to do every day. All right. So that's a habit trigger. So step 2, I want everybody to post in the chat. What is a reasonable habit trigger for you? Something where you go from the same thing every day to variability every day, where you could fit the container that you want to have. Now, consider this. I know a lot of people have day jobs, you have other things that are going on, and there's reasons why you can't do this first thing in the morning, and that is fine. But if you try to stack this at the end of your day, you're going to be really tired. You're going to want to crash, watch Netflix, relax, all completely reasonable things to want to do. So try to find somewhere else in your day when this would fit, so that it has a higher priority than just like the last thing you end up doing in the day, because that's how it falls off the bottom of your list. Okay. So it may not be first thing in the morning because you may have life circumstances that make that not possible. That's completely okay. Maybe it's after lunch, during lunch, mid-afternoon, right when you get home from work. I don't know. Pick something. Okay. So when you pick your habit trigger, then the third thing is, so if you walk yourself mentally through that thing that you're going to do, just like walk through that part of your day and think, what do I literally do last before things change every day and things are different? Frequently, I mean, for me, it's tea, right? I make a thermos of tea because I'm on the second floor and my kitchen's downstairs, and a cup of tea. And sometimes I drink the cup of tea downstairs, sometimes I bring it up with me, but I have my thermos of tea and I have my cup, and I walk up here, and there is a coaster on my desk. And I take my teacup and I put it down on my coaster, and I come to work. And I open up my computer, and that's my work time to start doing my daily setup and, getting started with my day. Okay. So I can picture exactly what happens at the end of my morning routine right before things become variable. So picture that in your head or write it down, even better. And then think, okay, so if I want my new habit to be the next thing I do, what would that look like? Where am I going to go in my home or workplace? What do I have in my hands? What is the first thing I need to pick up? What is the first thing I need to prepare? What needs to be in place for me to be able to just go right into the thing? Okay. So those are all of the conditions that you need to pre decide in order to make it easy to start building this habit. Okay. So the next piece to that is physically set up your space. Make sure you have a coaster on your desk and put it someplace where you're going to see it, where you go like, oh yeah, 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 that, and start reinforcing that stack of habits. Okay. So once you have that all in place, then you want to codify your new habit, write it down in this format. So after current habit, whatever it is you already do, I will new habit at time in location. So that's a phrase and or a sentence. And I want you to fill that in with your new habit and you write it down and keep that somewhere where you can find it. Um, it's it's a when then statement. So whenever I this, then I that. Whenever I finish this, then I that. And that is a way to help your brain kind of click everything into place and to remember this. Now, as you get started with this, stuff's going to happen. Something's going to come up and you cannot, get to the thing that day. And, the main thing to understand is when you have a habit, even when you are, you are like doing it, say 3 days a week or something like that, you can't get it to 5 days a week or 7 days a week or whatever it is your intention is. Your identity starts to shift to be the person who does the thing. And when you're the person who does the thing, when you miss a day, you're still the person who does the thing. You just didn't do it today. That's fine. You'll be back tomorrow. No big deal. And you can let that water just like roll off you and just feel clean about it and feel like that's fine. I wish I had done it, but you know, stuff came up. I needed to take care of this, doctor phone call or whatever it is, right? And you can still feel like you really are that person. That is the magic of having a solid creative habit. All right. So for the beginning of this, the first couple weeks, could be longer, you're going to need to remind yourself to do the thing. So you need to take physical reminders or digital reminders, whatever's going to actually catch your attention, and put them wherever you're going to be as you finish the thing right before. Right. So if you are making a pot of coffee and you're going to pour a cup of coffee and bring it upstairs, stick a post-it note to your coffee, like the actual bag of coffee on your counter, saying like right after this upstairs at the desk on the coaster, right? So you have physical space set up. You've pre-decided everything you're doing. You're setting up reminders. You still have to do it. I can't do that for you. But all of these, you've smoothed out all of these road bumps to getting into the place. Now, that doesn't mean the work itself is suddenly going to be simple and easy. On Saturday, we're going to talk about a lot of the things that can hold you up within the creative process itself, but you will have a place and a time to do it. And if you keep showing up, you will get there. I promise you will get there. Okay. That is what I've got for you today. I'm going to start answering some questions. First question is from Jana. I organized most of the things I need to get my project started. In my project, I need to wait till it actually happens. Now, what do I do in that in between time? Should I start with my other project? Okay, so I'm not sure what this refers to exactly, Jenna. I'm guessing it's you're waiting on somebody else to do something, like you have to, you're collaborating or you have to get approval or there's something along those lines. And if that's the case, then yes, I think you should have another thing that you're doing while you're waiting for that. Unless there's something you can do proactively, just sitting there and twiddling your thumbs is a way to feel really disempowered by the whole process. This is a thing that comes up a lot with people who collaborate. I've worked with a lot of people who are like theater directors or actors or something where it's like their creative work in some ways depends on other people. One thing I do talk about with people in that situation is that there's a lot of value in creating a creative habit that feeds your work this work that's gonna be collaborative. If that's your primary work, that's fine, but it's like it's something that will feed your creative process that you can do every day that does not depend on other people. So, like, if you're an actor, maybe you find a way to you find, like, a scene partner and you run lines and you practice stuff, or, you do vocal exercises, or I don't know, so you do something that is gonna feed your art and keep you warm, but that doesn't depend on other people's say so. So, it may be that you don't wanna start an entirely new project because that could get distracting, but you do need to do something. So, there's a kind of, um exploratory developmental work that frequently is solo, that could be something that fits in that slot. So hopefully that is helpful. Okay. So Jennifer says, you said our day one choice doesn't have to be a forever choice. I can see you not wanting it, not wanting to stick with this thing. How long do you think is good for the purposes of this week's exercise? Jennifer, this is not an exercise. This is your life. So if this is not a project that you feel like is a solid choice for you that you really wanna see through, then just take your time, slow down, and remake the choice. You don't have to stick with what you decided yesterday just because you decided it yesterday, but take the time to think about your criteria and make a choice that really makes sense, and then stick with it until it's done. That's how long you should stick with it. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that you'll never have a project where you get well into it, and it suddenly, when it's real and you're actually doing the thing, you're like, "Oh, this is a huge mistake. I don't wanna do this." Completely okay. You are allowed to change your mind, but I want you to do it thoughtfully and not out of fear of like, "I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if I can do this." But really going like, "No, this is not aligned with what I want out of my creative life. That's what I want you to be doing." So, I hope that that is where you're at with that. Again, take your time and remake that decision if the decision you made yesterday isn't the right decision or you're not confident in it. Again, in the Creative Focus workshop, we have quite a lot of stuff there, like lessons and training about how to make these decisions, lots of discussion about this. And I'm going to be doing this goal setting workshop live. I think it's mid May, no, mid June. So lots of resources to help you if you join the program. But if you don't, you can do this on your own. It's just a matter of really spending the time to go through that and be kind of careful with it. So yes, the idea is to stick with it until it's done, unless something appears that makes it very clear that this is not the project you should be doing. Okay. Virginia asks, would you recommend that the creative practice, if, for example, happens right after breakfast and before opening up the computer, happens at a different place away from the workplace? Well, if work, like, scare quotes work, happens at a certain place with a certain computer, and your creative work is not digital and can happen somewhere else, and you have another place for it, then yes, definitely separate those things because that's going to give you a different brain space, a different kind of like orientation, and you'll start to associate this other place with that creative work, and it'll be easier to develop that habit. Now, for me, everything happens within this box, right? I'm doing everything digitally these days, and so I kind of sit in the same place. Some people will do things, and you can do things like this, like you can create sort of different digital environments by using different apps or whatever. But it is tricky if everything's digital. But if it's not, then yes, take advantage of that. One thing I will do sometimes is take a laptop because this is a big desktop. I'll take a laptop and sit outside or go somewhere else with it if I'm doing something that's more contemplative and like trying to, reflect on things and stuff like that. But that's a good idea. Yes. Okay. All right. Gaynell asks, I realize as you were speaking that the habit I chose is one of the basic skills, creative mind keeping, but not directly contributing to my completion of current projects. Completing varied projects requires a flow of different skills. So, how should I craft my habit message, like the definition of the habit, to do any variety of what needs done? Well, I think the time container is the thing to say. It's like, I'm going to be working on this for an hour. And on Friday, when we do what is your next action, then you could start breaking down like what are the specific things I need to be doing in that window, like in that chunk of time, and have a sort of agenda for yourself to go through those things. Um, the there may be habits that you wanna build as well that are just sort of like creative warm-ups, like some people do things like morning pages and things like that. If that's something you wanna do, then I would that's an additional thing, but you also need to have a chunk of time to move your project forward or the project's not gonna move forward. So that needs a habit built around it, and my recommendation is do that first, um, and then if you feel like you need to also add a habit for morning pages or, sketch warm-ups or whatever it is, that could either take place as part of that time, or it could you could build that second. Once you've built this container for your project, you can add that as well, but one thing at a time, because if you try to do a bunch of things at the same time, it is a recipe for confusion and forgetting what you're trying to do and not having that repetition and building the habit properly. Okay. All right. So Eric asks, can you say more about criteria for choosing creative projects? I get 25% through a lot of the projects because I get excited about them, but I don't have a strong reason for doing them other than I like drawing, so I find it hard to build a habit. Okay, Eric, your assignment is to go to day one and listen through that entire recording where I mentioned a lot of different criteria that could go into this. Really, it's so personal. For some people, it's like they're really interested in activism, for example, and they want to choose things that are going to contribute to a cause. So that can give you a real sense of mission, right? For other people, the mission is I need to pay my rent. I want to, feed my children. This is a really, really important motivator for me. And so this needs to make money, right? So figuring out some sense of why this is important to you at a larger level than just like, I like drawing, uh, is a way to hold on to that long term, the hard work that happens in every project. If you're doing a project that is worth doing, you're going to have the kind of easy, fun part at the beginning where you feel like, oh my God, this is so exciting. It's so great. And then it's going to start to get a little real. And you'd be like, "Oh, this is kind of complicated. I'm not sure I quite know what to do here." And you keep working, keep working. And before you know it, you're in what I call the dark forest, which is in the middle where you're like, "Oh my God, I can't do this. I am not good enough. I don't have what it takes to finish this thing. And who am I to try to do this anyway?" And all that other stuff, which, by the way, is a very good sign. It means that you are stretching your capabilities. You're trying to make something truly new to you and in the world, and it's hard. And what you're trying to do, your brain is trying to put together pieces that are really disparate, right? That don't seem to go together. You start to make little connections here and there. And gradually, without even noticing it, you start making out of the dark forest. But then you're in the Khyber Pass. It's a term I got from Ira Glass. Khyber Pass is the part where you just have to put one foot in front of the other and just keep on moving. And that's when your habit pays off because you're going to be able to get through the hard work of finishing the thing. Once you figured it out, you basically figured out what you need to do. You have to keep on moving until you get to the end point. Okay. So stronger motivation in the sort of your decision making phase plus a habit is what gets you through long projects that are significant and really will be game changing and life changing for you. That's the recipe. Okay. All right. I got one more question here from Tamara. I'm trying to build a habit of doing my creative work for a longer period of time. For example, I'm trying to build a 3-hour morning writing habit, but I get distracted by other shoulds during this time. I'm trying to be a writer in the morning and a freelancer in the afternoon, but I keep feeling guilty that I'm not doing the freelancing. So then the creative writing doesn't get my full attention. The 30 minutes seems too negligible, but is planning for 3 hours the problem? Well, if you can't get through 3 hours, then don't plan for 3 hours. Try 90 minutes, maybe. Like a 90-minute session with a big solid break in the middle is pretty much what, there's lots of evidence around, flow and all this other stuff that most sort of like top performers, 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours is kind of the max for like a work session. That doesn't mean you can't have another one soon afterwards. But 3 or 4 hours is tops for the day, especially when you're writing and it's like very heavy cognitive work. So if you're expecting yourself to like plow through 3 hours solid, that may be the problem. And I would play around with the format of how you're doing that. The other thing is, if your freelancing is distracting and you feel like you have to do freelancing during that time period, I would look at how you are structuring your afternoons. And that may be the way that you solve this is like, how can you reassure yourself that you have it covered that you know you don't need to check your email until 1 o'clock or whatever it is because things are fine, they're not blowing up. Like, how can you set up systems so that your clients know that you are present from these hours to these hours, and they feel reassured they can find you and you're reliable and you're there, and therefore you don't have to think about them at other times, right? So how can you set up, uh, boundaries and guardrails around your freelance time that make it less anxiety producing to not be doing that? That is, I think, the really big question. Okay. Great questions today, you guys. That was awesome. I want you to create this habit and I want you to do your habit tomorrow and let me know how it went. Like, what happened? What questions came up? I want to know how this goes for you. And I will see you tomorrow for Creative Compass Day 3, where we will minimize your overcommitments and learn how to say a positive, life affirming no to yourself and to other people. Thanks everybody for being here, and I will see you tomorrow.